Two orphaned cubs had found sanctuary with Kira, a tribal healer who believed every life was sacred. Instead of fearing the predators, she welcomed them as gifts from the ancestors, knowing it was her duty to nurture what the jungle had entrusted to her care. She raised the lion cub and tiger cub as siblings, watching them grow from her bamboo hut as part of her sacred calling to protect all forest children. The unlikely family brought her purpose after losing her own daughter to illness years before. Months later, on a sweltering afternoon in the dry season, Kira discovered both cats had grown into magnificent adults who still considered her their mother. But their peaceful existence didn't last long. The sound of heavy boots and harsh voices signaled a far more dangerous threat. Poachers who believed they'd found the perfect isolated target with valuable prizes. They approached thinking she was just another vulnerable tribal woman. But what happened next would become legend throughout the Sundarbans. Before we continue, make sure you're following for more incredible stories of the bonds between humans and the wild. Deep in the Sundarbans Delta where Bangladesh meets India, in a region maps rarely bothered to name, Kira Mandal sat cross-legged outside her bamboo dwelling, smoke rising from her morning fire as she gazed across the tidal channels. 2 years had passed since the terrible night when both mothers died, and the forest still seemed to mourn their loss. At 45, she found herself guardian to creatures most would consider too dangerous to exist, living in the traditional stilt house her grandmother had built on this small island generations ago, each sunrise bringing new challenges and unexpected joys. Her sister lived in Khulna now, her brother in Dhaka. They sent word occasionally through the boat traders, but the long months between felt like lifetimes. That monsoon evening in late June had changed everything. Kira had been gathering medicinal herbs near the old mango grove when she heard the sounds of a territorial battle unlike any she'd witnessed before. Roaring that shook leaves from trees, snarling that seemed to tear the very air. When she finally found courage to investigate at dawn, the scene was heartbreaking. Two magnificent mothers lay still among the mangrove roots, a golden lioness and a striped tigress, both victims of a fight over territory that had left neither victorious. But worse, huddled against their fallen mothers, two tiny cubs mewed pitifully in the growing heat. The lion cub was perhaps 6 weeks old, golden-furred with enormous paws that promised great size. The tiger cub was slightly smaller, striped and spotted with that distinctive fuzzy coat of the very young. Both were dehydrated, hungry, and completely helpless. Kira's first instinct was to retreat. These were apex predators, even as infants. But as a healer trained in the old ways, she recognized the signs the ancestors sent. 2 mothers dead, 2 babies abandoned. This was no coincidence. This was a test, a calling, a sacred responsibility. "Forgive me, sisters," she whispered to the fallen mothers. "I will honor your cubs as my own." Carrying the cubs in her herb-gathering basket, Kira brought them to her home. She'd raised orphaned deer, wild pigs, even a young elephant calf that had later returned to its herd. But never anything like this. She named them according to tradition. The lion cub became Surya, for the sun-golden color of his coat. The tiger cub became Priya, for she was precious beyond measure. In those first critical weeks, Kira fed them goat's milk from a bottle fashioned from bamboo, kept them warm during the cool nights, and prayed constantly to the forest spirits for guidance. The cubs, perhaps because they'd never known different, accepted each other as littermates. They nursed together, slept tangled in a furry pile, played with the rough-and-tumble affection of true siblings. Surya, despite being a lion far from his natural habitat, seemed to understand that Priya was family. Priya, though tigers were naturally solitary, treated Surya as her closest companion. As weeks turned to months, Kira documented their growth in the traditional way, through stories told to the wind, measurements carved into bamboo, and observations shared with the other forest spirits during her evening prayers. Both cubs grew rapidly, their play becoming more sophisticated, their bonds deepening. Surya developed the proud bearing of his species early, but always deferred to Priya during their games. Priya showed the intelligence tigers were known for, but shared her discoveries with Surya before exploring further. They hunted insects together, stalked Kira's chickens, unsuccessfully, and spent hours grooming each other with the dedication of devoted family. Kira was careful to maintain the balance between nurturing and wildness. She fed them as needed, provided shelter during storms, and treated their minor injuries, but she never tried to make them domestic. These were wild souls temporarily in her care. She knew that someday, they would need to choose their own paths. The other villagers, when the boat traders brought news of the strange household, reacted with mixtures of fear and awe. Some called her crazy. Others recognized her as touched by divine purpose. The regional forest officer, when he finally made the difficult journey to her island, was too amazed to issue citations. "This is impossible," Officer Rahman said, watching 6-month-old Surya and Priya sharing a meal. "Lions and tigers don't coexist. They compete, fight, kill each other." "These two never learned that," Kira replied simply. "They only know love." As the cubs grew into juveniles, then subadults, their size and strength became impressive. By 18 months, Surya weighed nearly 200 pounds and sported the beginnings of a magnificent mane. Priya topped 150 pounds and moved with the fluid grace that made tigers legendary. Yet around Kira, they remained gentle giants, greeting her each morning with headbutts and purrs that vibrated through her bones. The dry season brought new challenges. Fish became scarce in the tidal channels. The few deer on the island learned to avoid the area. Kira supplemented their diet with chickens she raised specifically for this purpose, but she worried constantly. Were they getting enough nutrition? Were they developing proper hunting instincts? Then came that terrible morning in early March. Kira woke before dawn to feed her chickens and found Surya and Priya both missing. Not unusual, they often roamed the island at night, but something felt different. The forest was too quiet, the usual bird calls absent. She found them at the north end of the island, both injured. Surya had deep gashes along his flank. Priya limped badly on her rear left leg. They lay together under a cluster of palm trees, licking each other's wounds with tender care. "What happened?" Kira asked, though she suspected the answer. Territorial males, perhaps, or another tigress challenging Priya's claim to the island. Both cats looked at her with expressions that seemed almost human in their complexity. Trust, pain, but also something else. Determination. Kira's hands shook as she examined their injuries. Nothing life-threatening, but significant enough to require treatment. Using techniques passed down through generations of tribal healers, she cleaned their wounds with warm salt water, applied poultices made from local medicinal plants, and wrapped the worst cuts with clean cloth. For 3 days, both cats remained close to the house, recovering and allowing Kira to change their dressings twice daily. Their trust in her during this vulnerable time moved her to tears. These magnificent predators, capable of killing her with a single swipe, lay still as stone while she tended their wounds. "You're not cubs anymore," she told them on the 4th morning as they both stood and stretched, testing their healing injuries. "You're adults. The forest calls to you." She was right. Over the following weeks, Surya and Priya began ranging further from the house, staying away for days at a time. They always returned, bringing gifts, a fish for Kira, a flowering branch, once a peacock feather that Priya placed carefully at Kira's feet like an offering. But Kira could see the change. They were wild now, truly wild, with needs she couldn't meet from her small island home. She began preparing herself for the inevitable goodbye. It was a Friday morning in late April when everything changed forever. Kira was at her herb garden, tending the medicinal plants that provided both her living and her calling, when she heard the unfamiliar sound of a motor boat approaching from the South Channel. Visitors were rare, uninvited visitors even rarer. 3 men disembarked onto her small beach, their clothing and equipment immediately identifying them as outsiders. City clothes, expensive boots, and most ominously, rifles and nets. "Poachers. You the crazy woman with the big cats?" the leader asked without introduction. He was tall, scarred, with the cruel eyes of someone who saw wildlife only as profit. Kira's blood chilled. She glanced toward the forest, hoping Surya and Priya were far away on one of their extended hunts. "I don't know what you mean," she replied carefully. "Don't play stupid with us, grandmother. We heard about your pets. Lion and tiger, living together. That's worth more money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes." The second man, younger but equally hard-looking, was already unloading tranquilizer equipment. Alive, they're worth 50,000 each to the right buyer. Dead, maybe 10,000 for the parts. Either way, we're not leaving empty-handed. Kira backed toward her house, mind racing. Her neighbors were miles away across treacherous channels. No phone, no radio, no way to call for help. She was alone with 3 armed men who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to wealth. "Where are they?" the leader demanded, following her. "We know they're here. Fresh tracks all around your house, scat near the water. Big cats mark territory. These are marking yours." A sound from the forest made all 4 of them freeze. A low rumble, barely audible but unmistakably feline. Then another, slightly higher in pitch. The poachers grinned. "There we go. Come out, kiddies. Uncle has some nice drugs that'll put you to sleep." What emerged from the mangrove shadows was beyond their comprehension. Surya appeared first, now fully grown at nearly 400 pounds, his mane thick and golden in the morning light. His amber eyes fixed on the strangers with cold intelligence. Priya followed, sleek and powerful at 300 pounds, her orange and black stripes seeming to shift and blur as she moved through the dappled shadows. Her green eyes held the same lethal focus. But what truly stunned the poachers was how the 2 cats moved. Not as competitors or enemies, but as partners. Surya took the left flank, Priya the right, both positioning themselves between the intruders and Kira. "Holy shit," the youngest poacher breathed. "They're working together." The leader raised his rifle. "Even better. 2 for the price of 1 shot." That's when Kira's children struck. Surya charged from the left with a roar that shook leaves from trees, not at the men but at their boat, his massive paws and claws reducing the fiberglass hull to floating debris in seconds. No escape by water. Priya circled right, her movement fluid and silent until she was behind the poachers. When the leader spun to track Surya, she announced her presence with a growl that raised every hair on the men's arms. Trapped between 700 pounds of cooperative apex predators, the poacher's bravado evaporated. The youngest dropped his net and scrambled up the nearest palm tree. The second man backed against Kira's house, rifle shaking in his hands but not daring to fire. Both cats were too close, moving too fast. The leader, more experienced with dangerous situations, tried to maintain control. "Easy, kiddies. Easy now." Surya and Priya had other plans. Moving with coordination that seemed impossible for their species, they began herding the men like sheep. Surya would charge from one side, forcing them to move away from Kira. When they tried to regroup, Priya would appear from another angle, her massive paws leaving gouges in the earth as she blocked their path. It wasn't an attack, it was a demonstration. A clear message that these intruders were outmatched, outmaneuvered, and entirely at the mercy of creatures they'd underestimated. The psychological warfare worked. Within 10 minutes, all 3 poachers were crying, begging, promising to leave and never return. The leader had wet himself. The man in the tree was praying loudly in 3 languages. Kira watched from her doorway, awed by the intelligence and restraint her children showed. They could have killed all 3 men easily. Instead, they chose dominance, control, and protection. "Enough," she called softly. Both cats immediately backed away, though they remained alert and positioned between the poachers and their foster mother. "Your boat is destroyed," Kira told the trembling men. "The next tide will carry the pieces out to sea. You'll swim to the next island, 3 kilometers through crocodile waters, or you'll stay here and explain to my children why you came to hurt their family." The choice was easy. All 3 men entered the tidal channel and began swimming, their expensive equipment abandoned on the beach. Kira never saw them again, though she heard through the boat traders that 3 waterlogged strangers had been rescued near Dublarchar Island, raving about impossible cooperation between natural enemies. That evening, as the sun painted the channels gold and red, Kira sat outside her house with Surya and Priya flanking her like living bookends. Both cats were calm now, grooming themselves and each other with the relaxed efficiency of satisfied protectors. "You saved me," she told them, her hands stroking their magnificent heads. "But more than that, you showed me what love can create when it transcends what the world says should be possible." Surya rumbled deep in his chest, a sound of contentment. Priya stretched and placed her massive head in Kira's lap, purring with the intensity of distant thunder. A week later, Officer Rahman returned with a small team to investigate reports of the poaching attempt. They found the abandoned equipment but no sign of the perpetrators. More importantly, they found Kira living peacefully with two of the most magnificent big cats they'd ever seen. This defies every principle of animal behavior, Rahman's wildlife biologist colleague muttered, watching Surya and Priya share a meal without conflict. Lions and tigers separated by evolution for millions of years. They shouldn't be able to coexist. Maybe, Rahman replied, they never learned they were supposed to be enemies. The story spread throughout the region, then the country, then the world. Scientists came to study the impossible relationship. Photographers captured images that graced magazine covers. Documentary filmmakers recorded footage that would be viewed by millions. But for Kira, the attention was secondary to the daily miracle of her family. Each morning, she woke to find Surya and Priya nearby, sometimes playing in the shallows, sometimes hunting together in the mangroves, always ready to return to her side when called. As the seasons turned, both cats reached full maturity. Surya's mane became legendary among the local fishermen, a golden crown that caught sunlight like fire. Priya's grace and intelligence earned her reverence as a spirit made flesh. Yet around Kira, they remained what they'd always been, her children, raised with love, bonded by trust, united by experiences that transcended species. The attempted poaching became local legend, told and retold until it took on mythical proportions. Some versions featured a dozen poachers. Others described supernatural intervention. But those who knew Kira understood the simple truth. Love had created something extraordinary, and that love had been fierce enough to protect itself when threatened. On quiet evenings, when the three of them sat together watching the sun set over the endless waterways of the Sundarbans, Kira would reflect on the miracle of their bond. Two cubs who should have been enemies, raised by a woman who should have been their prey, creating a family that shouldn't have been possible. But love, Kira had learned, was not bound by the rules others wrote. Love created its own reality, its own laws, its own fierce and beautiful impossibilities. Years later, when researchers asked her secret, Kira's answer was always the same. I didn't make them siblings. They chose to be siblings. I just gave them space to love each other as they were meant to. Surya and Priya never mated with their own species. They never established separate territories. They lived as they'd been raised, as family, as partners, as proof that the bonds formed in love could overcome any supposed limitation of nature. When Kira finally passed away at age 67, both cats remained by her grave for 3 days, their vigil witnessed by the entire community. Then, together as they'd lived, they disappeared into the deep mangroves, becoming legend themselves. Local fishermen still report sightings, a golden lion and striped tiger hunting as partners, moving through the waterways with synchronized purpose, living proof that love can rewrite the rules the world insists must govern us all. In the small shrine the village built for Kira, her story is told to every child. The healer who raised enemies as siblings, who showed the world that family is not about blood or species, but about choice, care, and the fierce courage to protect what matters most. The impossible bond of the wild, where love conquered evolution itself.